Good evening. It is Thursday, October 16th, 2025. We are now tracking a tropical wave that is now located in the central main development region of the Atlantic. The National Hurricane Center is also watching this as this moves generally off towards the west-northwest at about 20 miles per hour. And there are still strong indications that this tropical wave is going to develop somewhere over here in the central or northwestern Caribbean in about 7 to 10 days. Right now, the latest 7-day graphical tropical weather outlook from the National Hurricane Center in Miami, Florida gives us a low 20% chance of tropical development over the next 7 to 10 days. This includes for Jamaica as well as the southern portion there of the Haitian Peninsula in Haiti, the Dominican Republic, as well as the far northern portion there of Venezuela in Central America. Anybody living in this area of highlighted area needs to be watching this system very closely. Regardless of tropical development, heavy rainfall and gusty winds are nonetheless expected with this, including for the Windward Islands, which we'll get here in just a second, because there's going to be a lot of heavy rainfall crossing those islands in the next 3 to 4 days. So now the big question in today's update that is on everybody's mind is whether or not will this tropical wave develop into anything significant from a tropical depression with 35-mile-an-hour winds all the way up to a hurricane with winds greater than 74 miles per hour. So we're looking at the 850 millibar vorticity plot here at 5,000 feet above the surface from the European deterministic forecast initialized this morning. And we can see where the tropical wave will be in about 3 days. So on Sunday morning, October 19th, there is very good model support that the tropical wave will be over here just to the east of Barbados by Sunday morning. Okay, and then it's going to be moving and approaching Barbados and moving over most of the Windward Islands by the time we go into Sunday night into early Monday morning. This is going to bring a lot of rainfall, some strong winds associated with the tropical wave, and some thunderstorms. But we have to understand here that even so there is some decent vorticity on this plot here from the Euro, there is not very high likelihood that this is going to develop in earnest in a hurry. And the reason why for that is this is going to be moving through pretty dang quickly. So by Monday or Sunday night into Monday morning, it's going to be making the crossing over most of the Windward Islands here, such as Dominica, St. Lucia, Martinique, as well as some of the islands down here, including for Barbados, in about that time frame. And secondly, the wave is not very well sharply defined here. And what I mean by that is if we look at these wind barbs, we have flow doing this. And actually, let me get my arrow key here. So we have flow, oops, that's not the way to do it. So we have flow doing this around the tropical wave, and then it kind of curves around. And so we have flow doing kind of like this. It is not very well defined where we have a closed circulation where we have westerly winds wrapping all the way around this to kickstart stronger vorticity advection for the system to consolidate a little bit better. And that's because the system's moving through too fast. And it's going to take quite a bit of time before consolidation and genesis actually occurs. And so by the time we go into, let's go into Monday morning here on the 20th of October, the tropical wave is over here. We go back again to Sunday morning, the tropical wave is over here. So it's moved that much in 24 hours. That's pretty fast, okay? That's at around a speed of about 20 to almost 25 miles an hour. And because it's moving so fast, that's going to limit this thing from developing in a hurry, and some dry airs and some vertical wind shear we'll be looking at. So by Tuesday morning, the tropical wave is approaching pretty much right in the middle of the Caribbean here. You can see where we have the demarcation of some vorticity, really broad in nature, not really sharp at all on the European deterministic forecast. And then as we move forward, this wave really doesn't consolidate at all over the next 7 days from the Euro model standpoint. We look at the previous model, it's been pretty consistent at insisting that it's not going to be a big problem over here versus what prior model runs. So we've seen a little bit of a downtrend here, but my point here is there is definitely a circulation here, actually a closed circulation, but broad in nature, not very tight. But we do have a spinner right here in the southwestern side of the deep tropics of the Caribbean. Now, after that point, things get complicated on where and when this consolidates. And if it does, it could do so very quickly. If we look at the European model out to day 10, it is approaching or pretty much just kind of drifting over the coast here of Nicaragua and Honduras in about 9 to 10 days. That would be Friday into Saturday and even into Sunday here as a bona fide tropical depression or tropical storm. If this does become a named storm, it will be Melissa, our 13th named storm of the 2025 Atlantic hurricane season. And so that is something to consider here. We are not done at seeing uptrends or downtrends with the modeling here. And if this again gets named, it would be Melissa. So that's a look at the 10-day forecast. Now, we rarely go out far into the future here, but there is some things I did want to point out here in this video. Is one of those is where will it head, right? So there's models are going all over the place. The GFS that I'm about to show you shows a completely different scenario, and it has been kind of locked on that scenario for a while versus a European model being much further off to the west and developing the system a lot later. And that is because there is a lot of upper level complications that need to be resolved on the models. And that's due to vertical wind shear, moisture, as well as steering currents that help to guide these storms wherever the steering currents allow them to do. But as we go out to the 300-hour mark, this really stalls. It just drifts. It doesn't really move. And when you deal with a system here that doesn't move very quickly, we really don't know where it's going to go. It can go north, it can go further west, it can go further south, or it can go back east where it came from. And so there is a lot that we don't know yet. All we know is that this has a ceiling that still begs a question that will this become a hurricane? And right now, there is low to medium confidence of that occurring right now based on the latest European deterministic forecast and some of the ensembles that I'm about to show you. So something to consider if you're watching this from the Yucatan, from Belize, from Nicaragua, Honduras. If you're on the Cayman Islands, if you're on Jamaica, and even on Cuba, you need to be watching this system really closely. And even if you're on the Haitian Peninsula here of the Dominican Republic, Haiti, as well as Hispaniola, you need to be watching this system too. Because if this turns north sooner, or if it drifts and goes this way and then turns and kind of bends back like this, that would still bring these islands in play eventually. All right. Now, looking at the GFS model here, let's kind of play this through. We can see that the GFS has a formidable tropical storm and hurricane here. And actually, let's go back to where this starts off at. So you can see the tropical wave here, not very well defined versus the European model. And the GFS model has been quite consistent at showing this evolution where the wave is not really well defined here. And it's pretty much stretched from east to west here. You can see a little bit of southerly flow here and a stronger belt of northerly flow here, helping to keep the wave axis pretty much tilted in this general quadrant. So you have flow doing this, it kind of bends around. This is not very ideal for a system to really spin up very quickly within. It needs to be tilted a little bit more from the southwest to the northeast to get vorticity stretching of the system. But eventually what ends up happening is that the system does try to consolidate around the day 7 time frame right to the east of, say, Puerto Rico here. And again, this would be a formidable tropical storm, or if not, a low-grade hurricane. And then it goes out to sea and remains a very strong hurricane. It does not hit Bermuda, and as this would go northeast in about 10 days. So we have some very wild outcomes here from the GFS. And in the recent model runs here, especially the last 1, 2, and 3 model runs, the models have shifted, or the runs have shifted further to the east with this, meaning that the system turns a lot sooner and goes out to sea and leaves everybody alone over here in the northwestern Caribbean. That is a distinct possibility here, because what the GFS does indicate that the ridge over here is a little weaker. It is not as dominant as what the European model shows, and we have a trough that comes down into the southeastern United States, helps to erode this western flank of the subtropical ridge. So what we end up seeing is that the system gets slingshotted to the north, and it turns out to the northeast harmlessly, because then this trough gets involved and it gets captured. It kind of follows that weakness. It doesn't really get captured by the trough, but it finds a weakness in the subtropical ridge. And we can even see that here in the 500 millibar height chart. If we play that through, you can see this trough right here digs enough to the south here where, it leaves a weakness in the subtropical ridge. And there's a little bit of something here helping to yank the system with it off to the north. So that's one of the scenarios. But we have another scenario, and this is a little further to the west here, and this is what the Canadian model is showing. So, of course, the Canadian has been pretty bullish at showing a more significant system here on approach to Barbados as well as St. Lucia, including for Martinique, Dominica, those sort of islands. Again, there's Barbados right there, that little island. And this passes right to the north of Barbados in about 84 hours, so by Sunday night, and then crosses the rest of the islands by early Monday morning as a strong tropical storm. And then what ends up happening is it does try to strengthen a little bit, but then it's able to get a little further to the west than what the GFS model indicates. And right now, the Canadian model indicates that it would make landfall somewhere over here over the far western portion of the Dominican Republic, over the Haitian Peninsula of Haiti, in about 7 days, versus our GFS model kind of over here, meaning that the GFS is still potentially an outlier here, and shifts back to the west with the GFS are not entirely out of the question or off the table right now. Since this is in the early stages of forming, we just don't know how far west and how strong this is actually going to be able to get once it gets into the Caribbean. But what ends up happening is as it gets into the southwestern Atlantic, it gets captured by this very long wave-sharp trough here and gets entangled within it, meaning that it's not very thermodynamically favorable for tropical genesis after that point, as it kind of gets slingshotted northward within the background flow out of the southerly direction. So that's one of the other scenarios. So we go from a scenario, something like the European model at 10 days, showing that the system is still stuck down here in the far western Caribbean, to a system on the GFS. If we go out to 10 days here, we can see a very different scenario, a system way over here in the Atlantic, believe it or not, versus a system over here. So there is definitely a big spread between each model run and between different models. I said models twice there. Sorry about that, but you get the idea. A lot of uncertainty in the forecast. Now, looking at the icon model really quickly, you can see what that model actually shows, pretty much on latching onto the fact that the Canadian model is more reliable here in this scenario, as the icon is right on top of it, but really not very much defined here versus what the Euro is showing. So right now, it is going to be a testimony of which model is handling this system a lot more better. But if I would be able to pick, it would be the European model. It's been very consistently at indicating that the system really stalls somewhere in this area over Jamaica or to the southwest of that, near the Yucatan Peninsula, as well as Belize, as well as, say, Nicaragua and Honduras. Now, there are some challenging factors on just how intense this will get initially before it enters a more conducive environment, is the upper level winds here. Looking at the European model at the 200 millibar flow chart here, this is at about 38,000 feet above the surface. So this is where commercial airliners fly, including the G4 aircraft. And what we have here is, of course, pay attention to this jet stream right up here to the north. We have a trough here. We have another trough here with stronger jet stream winds, with winds between 60 to 80 knots. But what we do have here is also a little bit of westerly flow here. Doesn't seem very strong at all, but there's a little bit of a ribbon here of westerly winds over much of the eastern Caribbean. And because our system, of course, it is not moving with the upper level winds and it is moving against the upper level winds, that increases vertical wind shear and tilt with our system. And we saw what happened with Jerry. It did not fare well with this type of pattern, and it really decoupled itself because of that upper level vertical wind shear. Same thing could be true with our system, but only that this system is more weaker and it's shallower with the vortex. So therefore, it might resist a little bit of this upper level wind at the beginning until it finds itself in a more conducive environment. And we can see that even so upper level winds here are not very strong, there is vertical wind shear here of at least 30 knots, and that will prevent this system from developing in earnest once it gets into the Caribbean. Now, it is once we get beyond the day 7, day 8, and day 9 period where the upper level environment becomes more conducive, we start seeing divergent flow here in the 200 millibar layer where we have outflow in all quadrants here, and our system is right underneath all of that. And so that means the upper level winds doing this in this type of configuration allows the system to breathe a lot of that convection outward in all quadrants, helping to lower the surface pressures at the lower levels and kickstart tropical cyclone genesis in earnest here. And that's what we have that ends up happening. We start seeing that outflow, but then it's going to kind of get cut off in earnest here as we go to 300 hours potentially, because now we have another trough approaching from left center here over to the Midwest, and that's going to basically yank or kind of slosh this subtropical jet further southward into the southern Gulf. And what ends up happening is now we're shoving the westerly winds into the system. So now, instead of our outflow in all quadrants doing something like this, right, where you want the system to breathe, well, the upper level outflow is now mainly in one quadrant, all right? And so that allows the system to not fare well. And so what ends up happening, the system does weaken, but it also strengthens because at the same time, we do get a very strong baroclinic interaction here with very strong poleward exhaust from the upper level outflow from the system. And this would allow the system to develop pretty quickly down to 935 millibars in about roughly 360 hours, which is extremely uncertain. We do not know if this is actually going to happen, but there is some indication from the Euro. It's been on to something for a while now, showing a more stronger outcome to all of this. So looking at the relative moisture plot here in the deep layers of the atmosphere, green and teal colors indicate lots of moisture. Brown colors like this down here indicates a lot of drier air over the southern Gulf. Dry air with vertical wind shear naturally will degrade a tropical system in a hurry versus a lot of moisture. And so we can see here where our low level circulation actually is here with that area of low pressure. And then here's our moisture plot. You can see what vertical wind shear does to the system. It offsets the deeper area of thunderstorm activity versus its circulation. But once the vertical wind shear really kind of falls apart, the system could restack itself and become better aligned where we can then kickstart the process of tropical cyclone genesis in about 10 days. And that's what ends up happening here on the European model. But keep an eye on that vertical wind shear. You can see how this becomes more asymmetrical with time because of that vertical wind shear here in the mid levels and the upper levels of the atmosphere. Now that we talked about the track and intensity of our tropical wave that is located here in the central main development region, whether or not will this actually develop into anything significant as it approaches the Windward Islands, we do not know for sure if that's going to actually happen right now. But what we do know, based on my experience of tracking these tropical waves through this part of the tropical Atlantic, things don't look very ideal for this to develop in a hurry unless it is very far south here. The further south this is, then it might find itself in slightly better conditions as vertical wind shear down here in the southeastern Caribbean is slightly lesser than it is across the northeastern Caribbean, if that makes sense. But that just means this could end up going further west a little more as what the European ensemble shows. Now, looking at the GEFS ensemble, very different solution here. Most of the members here have this developing over here in the central MDR, not the central MDR, in the central Caribbean. That's what I was looking for. And then it turns out very quickly here. It escapes. It's able to move northeast before it even gets close to the United States, sparing again the United States yet again with this system. We've been getting very lucky, and I'll be honest with you, I am very blessed and thankful for that because this year could have been a lot more impactful where we just have storm after storm after storm after storm. all of these storms hitting land. I mean, it could be 13 landfalls versus, 13 named storms and only one landfall in the United States mainland so far this season. And we've been on the really good side of things this hurricane season. So hopefully, fingers crossed, things continue to be that way. But unfortunately for our friends down here in the Caribbean, if this develops over here, someone's going to get impacted and get a landfall, and it could be a big one. So that's why we really need to watch this, because if this does turn northward, maybe Bermuda is at play again. We just don't know the full-on answer with that right now, because it's too early to tell exactly where this is going. Now, looking at the FNV3 model, we can see that some of the members here also indicate development here. This is the Google DeepMind AI forecast showing maybe tropical depression, tropical storm force-like winds there in the central Caribbean, as well as even on the generational model here showing the same thing. So my own thoughts with this system, do I think it's going to become a hurricane? There is definitely a distinct possibility, especially given how accurate and how consistent the European deterministic forecast has been as of late. I'm not too surprised. I really am not, given how favorable the environment might end up being, especially in this part of the Caribbean. Pretty much right over here is going to be the area that could foster a fairly significant system. But my own opinion on this is, because of the level of uncertainty, I have dropped the chances of this becoming a hurricane to a lower level. So instead of it being a 40 or 50% chance, it's now down to like 10 to 30% at this given time. So, of course, as long as this remains a potential threat, and as long as ensembles do show significant development, we will keep on keeping you all updated here on the YouTube channel. But anyways, if you haven't been here before and you did find today's tropical weather outlook and discussion very helpful, detailed, informative, and life-saving, please don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel if you haven't already. Hit that bell notification icon so you stay up to date here on the YouTube channel with daily tropical weather updates. And also, please hit the like button and share this video with your family and friends on social media. As always, have a great rest of your Thursday here on the 16th day of October, 2025. I'll be back with you more tomorrow morning with another tropical weather outlook and discussion if necessary.